They said it like a joke, like a harmless dare passed, around a folding table on a Friday night, when the site trailer reeked of spilled beer, stale sweat, and decisions nobody wanted to own on Monday morning. $500 cash if I slept with my boss. Laughter, slaps on the back, someone already pulling out a phone. But what none of them knew, what not, one of those men could have guessed was that I'd been looking for an excuse to cross that line for 6 months, and that this wasn't a joke to me at all. By the time I stepped into the elevator and rode it up to the top floor, I already knew this. Night would either burn my life down to the studs or finally give me the one thing I'd been too afraid to reach for. Clara Voss, Vice President of Development. The woman who could end a project with a single signature. The woman whose heels clicked like a countdown echoing through marble corridors. The woman who had been living in my head, rent-free since the first time she shut down a room full of men twice, her age with nothing but a calm voice and better numbers. She looked up from her desk when I walked into her office, city lights blazing behind her like a kingdom she'd built permit by permit, budget by budget. And before I even opened my mouth, I knew the truth. Whatever I said next would change everything. "I need to tell you something," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady even as my pulse tried to claw its way out of my throat. "Something that might cost me this contract." Clara closed her laptop with deliberate precision, the kind of control that made grown men rethink their entire sense of self. She stood, came around the desk, dark wood, minimalist, intimidating in its restraint, and stopped exactly 3 feet in front of me, close enough that I could smell sandalwood and rain, far enough that the final step would be my choice. "East Hale," she said, my name dropping into the quiet like a stone into deep water. "You've been careful with me for half a year. What changed?" The dare sat heavy in my pocket. Simmons's voice still rang in my head. The laughter, the money, the phone I hadn't realized was recording. $500 meant to buy my integrity. But the truth was heavier than the bet. "I was dared to ask you out," I said, forcing the words through the tightness in my chest. "By Simmons and his crew tonight. 500 if I did. It." I gave her the weapon that could destroy me and waited for the blow. Her expression didn't flicker. No shock, no anger. Something else entirely. "And yet you're here," she said softly, holding my gaze with an intensity that made lying impossible. "Telling me about the dare instead of just asking the question." I swallowed. "Because I'm not asking because of the dare. I'm asking despite it." Silence stretched between us. 3 seconds, 5, 10. Each one felt like a lifetime. Then Clara Voss smiled. Not the corporate smile she wore in boardrooms. Not the polite dismissal she used on men who underestimated her. This smile was different. Real. Dangerous. "I'm tired of waiting," she said, her voice dropping to something I'd never heard from her before, something that slid past every professional wall she'd ever built. "What took you so long?" My brain stalled. "You what?" She stepped closer, 1 foot, then another, until 3 feet became 3 inches, until I could see the flecks of silver in her gray eyes, until her presence filled every space I'd spent months pretending not to notice. "Did you think I didn't see?" she asked, her hand rising to my jaw, turning my face toward the light like she'd been studying me from afar and was finally allowed. A closer look. "The way you bring reports in person when email would do. The way you remember I take my coffee black. The way you look at me when you think I'm not watching." The floor tilted under my work boots. The same Carolina boots that tracked mud into her pristine building. The same ones that marked me as the guy who still went to sites while Simmons stayed clean. "Clara," I managed, "if this is inappropriate, against policy, dangerous for both our careers," she cut in, her thumb brushing my cheekbone with devastating precision. Her smile sharpened. "I filed preliminary disclosure paperwork with HR 3 days ago. East, I've been waiting for you to find your courage. 3 days ago, before tonight, before the dare, before Simmons ever opened his mouth. Why didn't you just—" "Because I'm your client," she said simply, the words slicing through every excuse I'd built. "Because I have power over your contracts, your reputation, your livelihood. If I made the first move, you'd never know if it was choice or coercion." Her eyes searched mine. "I needed you to choose me. Not the contract, not the access, me. 6 months of restraint crashed over me all at once. 6 months of careful distance. Of watching her build empires in boardrooms while I mapped drainage systems in the mud. 6 months of her waiting for a line she couldn't cross herself. "The dare," I said roughly. "Simmons recorded it." "Let him," Clara said, steel sliding into her voice, the sound of a woman who'd survived rooms full of men who wanted her gone. "I have documentation, timestamps, a paper trail that proves I planned to do this the right way long before he tried to turn it into a game." She stepped closer, her hand sliding from my jaw to the back of my neck. "The question isn't whether Simmons will try to destroy us. He will. The question is whether you're brave enough to stand with me when he does," my heart thundered. "I came here knowing it might cost me everything." "Then you already have your answer," she said, and pulled me in. The kiss wasn't careful. It was 6 months of restraint shattering in a single breath. Her fingers threaded through my hair. My hands found her waist, pulling her closer like I was afraid she'd vanish if I let go. She tasted like coffee and something sweet, like a promise I hadn't known I was waiting for. When she finally pulled back enough to breathe, her forehead rested against mine. "We do this right," she whispered. "No hiding, no sneaking. We disclose. We document. We follow every rule so when Simmons tries to weaponize this, he has nothing." Her eyes locked onto mine with absolute certainty. "But we do this, East. Starting now." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. She smiled softer this time, and kissed me again, slower, deeper, like she was sealing a deal that had nothing to do with contracts and everything to do with trust. "Come with me," she said, reaching for her coat. "We're leaving together." The parking garage was cold, oil and concrete hanging in the air. Our footsteps echoed as we walked side by side. My truck sat 3 rows over, mud still caked on the wheel wells. But Clara had her keys out, and I understood without her saying it. This was her move, her control, her choice. Her hand found mine in the dim light between cars, fingers lacing through mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. "My place," she said, unlocking a black sedan as precise and no-nonsense as she was. "We talk first. Ground rules. Then we figure out how to survive what's coming." I slid into the passenger seat, the interior smelling of sandalwood and rain on pavement, and watched her drive into the night with the calm confidence of a woman who had already decided she was done, waiting. The city slid past, the windows in streaks of white and amber as Clara drove, her hand steady on the wheel, her posture composed in a way that told me this wasn't recklessness, it was resolve. The adrenaline from her office still buzzed under my skin, the kiss replaying in my head with the kind of clarity that made it impossible to pretend. It hadn't happened. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, deliberate, filled with things neither of us wanted to cheapen by rushing into words. When she spoke, it was without looking at me, eyes on the road, voice calm. "Tell me exactly what Simmons has. Don't minimize it." I exhaled slowly, grounding myself. "He had his phone out in the trailer. I didn't realize he was recording until later. He got me talking about the dare, got Jake laughing in the background. He cut it to make it sound like I was bragging, like I planned to use you. He'll send it to HR, if he hasn't already." Her fingers tapped the steering wheel once, the only sign of anger. "He's predictable," she said. "And careless." She glanced at me, gray eyes sharp. "I meant it when I said I have documentation. I started disclosure on Tuesday. Emails, calendar notes, a consult with legal. He thinks he's 3 moves ahead. He's not." The certainty in her voice steadied something in me I hadn't realized was shaking. Her building rose out of the night like a glass blade, all clean lines and quiet authority. The doorman nodded to her by name. "Evening, Marcus." She led me through the lobby and into the elevator without hesitation, like I belonged there, like there was no universe where she'd apologize for choosing me. The doors opened directly into her condo on the 40th floor, the city sprawling beneath the windows. The space was pure Clara, minimalist furniture, deliberate choices, no clutter, shelves lined with engineering texts and thick binders. On one wall, framed photographs. Clara with an older woman who shared her eyes. "My mother," she said quietly, following my gaze. "She built her accounting firm in the 70s when banks wouldn't lend to women. She taught me never to apologize for power. Her voice softened. She has early onset Alzheimer's. Some days she knows me. Some days she doesn't. The armor slipped just enough for me to see the weight she carried. I'm sorry, I said, knowing it wasn't enough. Don't be, she replied, setting her keys down with care. Just don't waste my time. She turned to face me, arms crossed, the same stance she used in boardrooms before dismantling bad ideas. So tell me, East, are you here because you want me? Or because you want to win a dare? The question cut clean. I closed the distance between us slowly, deliberately, giving her every chance to stop me. I'm here because 6 months ago you defended a decision I made when your own project manager tried to override it, I said. Because you remembered my daughter's school play when I mentioned it once. Because you take your coffee black with one sugar and you schedule site visits when you know I'll be there. I stopped, close enough to feel her breath change. I'm here because you're brilliant and terrifying, and you're the only person in that company who treats me like I matter. Her arms fell to her sides. Your daughter, she said softly. You never told me. Emma, she's 8. Lives in Portland with her mom. Summers and holidays with me. The familiar ache surfaced. Clara's hand pressed flat to my chest, feeling my heart. You're a good father. I try. Simmons doesn't know about her, she said, already thinking ahead. No. Good. She kissed me then, slower, deeper, like she was committing the moment to memory. When she pulled back, her eyes shone. Stay, she whispered. Because you want to. I want to. Her phone buzzed on the counter, sharp and intrusive. She checked it, warmth draining from her face. HR, she said. Urgent. She read for 3 seconds, jaw tightening. He sent the recording. She didn't wait for my response. Fingers flew across the screen. This is what I prepared for, she said, hitting send. Monday morning we go together. We show them my disclosure timeline. We show them his violation. We show them he's retaliating. The confidence in her voice was a lifeline. Monday arrived like a collision. The office smelled the same, ozone and carpet. Cleaner, but everything else felt off. Conversation stopped when I passed. Clara waited in the conference room, composed in black and white. Helen Marks from HR across from her, David Cho beside her. The recording played. Simmons's laughter. My edited words. The worst version of the truth. Did this conversation take place? Helen asked. Yes, I said. But it was edited. I showed them my documentation, timestamps, messages sent before the complaint. Clara presented her disclosure, her legal consult, the proof she'd planned this before Simmons made it a game. The room shifted. Helen and David exchanged looks. Clara's voice was steady as steel. Mr. Simmons recorded a private conversation without consent and misrepresented it. That's the misconduct. When Helen said my contract wasn't in jeopardy, relief nearly buckled my knees. Clara wasn't finished. If there's retaliation, she said, I resign. 3 days later, Simmons was gone. Fired for the recording, for the violations he'd buried, for the pattern he thought no one would notice. Clara and I kept our boundaries at work and built something real outside. Dinners, late talks, video calls with Emma, where Clara asked about favorite books like it mattered. Because it did. 2 months later, after the project passed inspection, Clara met my eyes across the room and smiled, the real one. Later, at the overlook, she pressed a key into my hand. It's not a ring, she said. It's a key. You belong. I closed my fingers around it, feeling the weight of choice, of responsibility, of a life I'd finally stopped waiting to claim the weeks after. Simmons was fired settled into, something quieter but no less charged. The kind of calm that comes after a storm when debris is still scattered everywhere, and you're not sure yet what's been permanently altered. We didn't rush. Clara was adamant about that. During office hours, she was still Vice President Voss, measured, precise, untouchable. During meetings, she never looked at me longer than necessary, never gave anyone ammunition. But after hours, when the glass towers emptied and the city softened into light and motion, she became something else entirely. A woman who let herself exhale only when the door to her condo closed behind us. We talked more than anything at first. Long conversations, stretched across her living room with the city blinking beneath the windows. about power and fear and the strange loneliness that comes with competence. She told me stories about her early career, about being the youngest woman in rooms full of men who assumed she was an assistant, about learning when to be sharp and when to be silent. I told her about Emma, about the ache of watching her grow up through photos and summer weeks, about the way I measured my life in plane tickets and custody calendars. Clara listened the way she did in meetings, fully present but without judgment, and it made me realize how starved I'd been for that kind of attention. One night, as rain streaked the windows and the city blurred into something almost soft, she admitted she'd built her life so carefully that there hadn't been room for anyone else until now. "I don't fall easily," she said, curled against me on the couch, her head on my shoulder. "I calculate. I plan. This is new." I brushed my thumb along her hand, feeling the faint scar on her knuckle from a job site accident years ago. "You planned for this," I said gently. She smiled, that small, honest smile. "I planned for the possibility. I didn't plan for how it would feel." Mondays came and went without incident. HR concluded their investigation quietly, efficiently. No retaliation, no whispers from leadership. Simmons became a cautionary tale no one spoke about openly. At work, people adjusted to the reality that Clara Voss hadn't been taken down by a cheap recording and a bad faith complaint, and that alone shifted the power balance in ways I could feel. Contractors treated me differently now, not with fear but with a new respect. They knew I'd stood my ground and survived. Clara noticed it too. One evening as we cooked dinner together, in her immaculate kitchen, her chopping vegetables with surgical precision, me burning garlic because I was distracted watching her, she said, "You're standing straighter lately." I laughed. "Is that an engineering assessment?" "It's a leadership one," she replied. "You've always been competent. Now you believe it." That belief carried me through the harder moments. Like the first time Emma asked who Clara was during a video call, curiosity bright in her eyes. Clara didn't flinch. She leaned into the frame, smiled, and said, "I'm someone who cares a lot about your dad." Emma considered that seriously, then launched into a story about her science project. And just like that, the tension dissolved. After the call ended, Clara wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. "She's extraordinary," she said. "She is," I agreed. "And she likes you." Clara exhaled, something unguarded breaking through. That matters more than any board vote. We were careful, but we were also honest. When doubts surfaced about optics, about timing, about whether the cost would ever outweigh the reward, we faced them head on. One night, lying awake while the city hummed below, Clara said quietly, "If this ever starts to feel like you're shrinking yourself for me, you tell me. I won't build my life on someone else's compromise." I turned to face her, tracing the line of her jaw. "If it ever feels like you're carrying this alone," I said, "you tell me. I won't let you." The project that had nearly destroyed us became a strange kind of foundation. We finished it together, professionally flawless, personally charged with meaning no one else could see. At the final inspection, when the city signed off and the last report was filed, there was a sense of closure that went beyond work. The board celebration was all champagne and speeches, applause echoing off glass and steel. When Clara thanked the team, her eyes found mine across the room, and for a fraction of a second, the entire corporate theater fell away. Later that night, we drove out to the overlook above the site. The city spread out below like a living thing. That's when she gave me the key, simple and unadorned, heavy with intention. "Stop waiting outside," she'd said. Holding it now, standing beside her with the wind cutting through our coats, I understood how much of my life I'd spent asking permission to exist in spaces that never truly belonged to me. Clara didn't ask permission. She prepared, she chose, and she acted. And she'd chosen me. The drive back into the city was quiet, the radio low, her hand in mine. I watched the lights pass and thought about the absurdity of it all. How a dare meant to humiliate had collided with months of unspoken truth and forced a reckoning neither of us could avoid. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been clean. But it had been honest. And honesty, I was learning, was the most dangerous and rewarding choice of all. When we pulled into her garage and the door closed behind us, sealing out the noise, she leaned over and kissed me softly, Sure of herself, sure of us. Long way home? She asked, a smile in her voice. I looked at her, at the woman who had waited without demanding, who had prepared without pushing, who had met fear with strategy and courage in equal measure. Always, I said, and meant that the road had been long, but the destination, finally, was certain. We walked upstairs together, no longer hiding, no longer waiting, carrying with us the quiet understanding that whatever came next, we would face it the same way we'd faced everything else, deliberately, honestly, and side by side.